The rain had not stopped for 3 days the afternoon Victor Hale sold me. I stood in his marble foyer while his men carried my father's boxes to a table like inventory, and beyond the glass rose the gates of the De Luca estate. By nightfall, Victor said I would belong to Alessandro De Luca, the mafia boss whose ruthlessness was the only fact everyone agreed on. He patted my shoulder the way a man wraps a parcel. I said nothing. Men who sell women never pause to ask how the woman feels about it, and the rain does not stop just because you are being handed over. That morning, I had done what I had done every morning for 6 years, rolled my sleeves down before I looked in the mirror. The burns ran from my left wrist to my elbow in silver rivers of old fire, and a smaller scar crossed the back of my right hand. I covered them so long that I forgot the skin beneath was real. Then a stranger's glance would remind me that I carried visible history, and that some histories were best kept covered. The fire happened on a November night 6 years ago when I was 25 and believed the world judged people by the work of their hands. I was a junior conservator then, cleaning 200-year-old silk with cotton swabs and patience. The archive wing caught fire after a storm ruined the old wiring. Everyone got out. Everyone except the treasures, still burning on the 3rd floor where the Greaves tapestry hung. I ran back in. Not like a hero, but like a young woman who could not watch something irreplaceable die. I remember the weight of that tapestry, the heat of the room, the way the fire found my bare arms while my hands never let go of the cloth. They pulled me out with it still wrapped around me. 6 weeks in, a burn unit. 2 surgeries that were supposed to fade the marks. They never did. They settled into my skin like permanent residents, and every mirror became a negotiation about who I was now. The man I had been seeing visited me once and could not finish the visit. A week later he said the words I carried for years like a stone in my pocket. No one will want you now. I believed it with my whole chest because I had spent my life watching other people decide that damaged things were worth less. My father did not believe it. He sat beside my bed that winter, a quiet man with a failing textile business, and told me my hands were still the best hands he knew. Damage was a kind of history, he said, and history was worth keeping if you kept it honestly. He was the only one who saw my scars without flinching. When he died 3 years ago, the heart that simply gave out, I folded that lesson away and never let it out again. His business had failed a year after my fire when a shipping contract went bad and the buyers walked away. He spent his last years paying creditors with dignity, selling the house and the workshop. I thought the debts had died with him. They had not. The letters began arriving a month after the funeral, on Victor Hale's letterhead, each more insistent than the last, until the sum grew into something no conservator's salary could touch. Victor came to my apartment myself first with a pleasant smile, then without it. He laid the papers across my kitchen table like a dealer showing a hand he already knew he would win. Your father signed a personal guarantee on the 3rd note, he said. When he died, the obligation passed to his estate. And his estate, Miss Bennett, is you. I asked what he wanted. The money is gone, he said. What I want is simpler. I owe an old debt to a man named Alessandro De Luca. I cannot pay it in cash, but I hold a note on a valuable asset, so I have arranged to transfer that asset and you to him as collateral against my obligation. You will live in his house until he decides the debt is settled. You are selling me, I said. He smiled and called it a future. He told me a car would come on Thursday and that De Luca was not a patient man, and that everyone in the world was afraid of him. I sat at that table a long time after he left, turning the rumors over, the way dealers lowered their voices when his name came up. They said he ran half the port, that his security company was only the respectable face of something darker, and that men who crossed him were simply crossed out. I thought about running. I had 300 pounds and a passport and a friend abroad who would hide me without a question. I packed a bag that night, then unpacked it because running was only another way of giving Victor what he wanted. A frightened woman, easy to find, easier to control. Whatever came next, I would walk into it with my eyes open. On Thursday, at 31 years old, I put on my best dress, rolled my sleeves down twice, and packed the one thing I refused to leave behind. My restoration kit, my father's brushes and needles. The car was black and silent. The driver never spoke. We drove until a lake lay flat as a coin, and the De Luca house rose out of the trees like something older than the town. Victor waited in the foyer, dry and pleased, directing men who carried my boxes. I had the strange sense of attending my own funeral without having died. Then a door opened at the far end of the hall, and Alessandro De Luca walked out of his study into the light, and every thought in my head went quiet. He was not what I expected. A man of 37, tall and lean in a dark suit without ornament, he gave nothing away, not anger, not interest, not even the boredom I had braced for. He looked at Victor first, and something in that look made Victor's smile tighten by a single degree. Then he looked at me, and I felt, for the first time in my life, what it was to be truly seen. Victor began to explain the arrangement in his holy voice. Alessandro held up one hand, and the words stopped midair. He crossed the foyer, stopped an arm's length from me, studying my face like a forged signature. Do you understand what is happening here? He asked. Not what Victor is telling you. What is actually happening? I found my voice. I understand that I have been sold, he said. Something moved behind his eyes, too fast to name. That is what Victor believes, he said. I am asking what you believe. I did not know how to answer because I had stopped asking myself questions I was afraid to answer. He waited, and his waiting told me more than words because every powerful man I had ever met filled silence with his own voice. This one simply stood there and let mine be empty. Finally I said, I believe I am standing in a stranger's house with my life in a box. No one has asked me what I want since my father died. He nodded, once slowly, as if I had said something he had long waited to hear. Then he said, the sentence that undid every warning I had been given. What do you need to feel safe tonight? Rosa, the housekeeper, led me to a suite on the second floor with windows over the lake. The door had a lock, and it worked from the inside. She told me, with careful formality, that no one would enter without my permission, not even the master himself. I locked the door the moment she left and waited for the trap to spring. Nothing sprang. The room stayed quiet, warm and mine. I did not sleep. I lay awake listening to the house, waiting for the version of the night that matched every story I had ever been told. In the morning I found my restoration kit waiting on the dresser, arranged exactly as I kept it at home. I did not know how anyone had known to handle it that way, and the care of the gesture frightened me more than cruelty would have, because cruelty I understood. Kindness with no price attached was a language I had forgotten how to speak. That first breakfast, Alessandro asked what I wanted to eat. I said whatever was easiest, and he waited until I understood he would not let me disappear into politeness. So, I told him the truth. I had not had a proper breakfast in years, and I wanted eggs, toast, and something sweet. He gave the order without comment. When the food came, he said, you did not answer what was easy. You answered what you wanted. That is all I have ever asked of anyone in this house. I searched his face for the cruelty I had been promised and found only a man who ate slowly. My sleeve rode up when I reached for the butter, and I pulled it down before the thought finished forming. He saw it. He said, nothing. The nothing was the kindest thing anyone had said to me in 6 years. The first week passed in that strange silence. Doors were opened for me. Nobody stared at my arms. Nobody asked what I was worth, and I did not know what to do with so much respectful distance, so I tested it like thin ice. I asked Rosa for the rest of my belongings, the books, the small things. By evening the boxes were in my room, and someone had handled my grandmother's photograph without a single crease. I went looking for the cruelty because I needed it. If the monster everyone feared turned out to be kind, everything I had believed since the hospital would have to be re-examined. One evening, I passed the half-open study door and saw him with 2 men. A ledger lay open on the desk, and one of the men was trembling the way men tremble before losing everything. Alessandro's voice came out low and flat, without anger, describing what the betrayal had cost and what the man still owed. The man wept openly. Alessandro told him to go home and be grateful this was a study, and not somewhere with fewer walls. I slipped away, my heart beating hard. Here was the man from the stories, the one who did not raise his voice because he did not need to. The next morning he asked whether I preferred tea or coffee, and I almost laughed, for it was the same mouth that had emptied a grown man of his dignity the night before. That was when I understood the paradox. The ruthless man of the stories and the patient man who asked about tea were the same person. He kept his cruelty in one room and his courtesy in another, and I had been installed in the room with the courtesy. I did not trust it for a second because I had learned to distrust anything I had not paid for. So I waited for the bill to arrive, the way you wait for thunder after lightning. The cracks in my suspicion began with Sofia De Luca, Alessandro's aunt, a small woman of nearly 60 who took charge of me the way she took charge of everything else, which was thoroughly and without apology. She did not ask who I was or why I was there. She asked whether I could tell the difference between a wedding veil from the last century and a knockoff from a costumer, and when I answered correctly, she smiled like she had won a bet. In the long gallery she uncovered a piece of lace so damaged it looked as if it had been crumpled and smoothed out again. It was old, maybe 200 years, a De Luca wedding lace, eaten by light and damp until whole sections were nothing but memory. Everyone says it's too far gone, Sophia said. My grandmother used to say that mending was the only honest kind of love because you only mend what you refuse to throw away. I told her I was a conservator by trade, and the word hung between us like a key turning. Alessandro found me in the gallery that evening before the lace. Aunt Sophia has decided you are staying, he said. I said, she has decided I am useful. He almost smiled. That is the same thing here. He told me there was a room off the old kitchen, north-facing with good light and a long table, that it had been his mother's sewing room once, and that it was mine for as long as I was his guest. I said yes before I could stop myself. The room was everything a restorer could want. I set up my kit the first morning and did not look up again until the light failed. I had not worked properly since my father died, and my hands had missed it like a voice missed. By the end of the week, the lace and I had reached an understanding. I could not put back what the light had eaten, but I could anchor every thread that remained, and where history had to be filled, I would fill it honestly. I asked him once whether he trusted me. He answered with a question. Do you want me to? I said yes. Then you will have to show me, he said, by doing what you need without asking permission. I did not understand then how radical that permission was. In Victor's world, I had been an asset to be managed. In his sewing room, I was becoming a person who owned her own time, and he watched me practice that freedom without taking it back. Alessandro came to the doorway one afternoon and stood watching without speaking. When I finally looked up, he asked what I was doing, and I told him, and he listened with the same attention he brought to a ledger. You do not erase the damage, he said. If you erase every trace of it, he said, you destroy the history. The damage is part of what happened to it. He was quiet a long time. I have never heard anyone describe their work that way, he said and left. That night I could not sleep, so I went back to work, and my sleeve caught on the frame and pulled up to my elbow. The burns lay bare under the lamp. I shoved the sleeve down with both hands, my heart slamming, and when I looked up, Alessandro was standing in the doorway. He had been there long enough to see. I waited for the pity, but careful not looking. He looked at my covered arm once, and then at my face. I will not pretend I did not see, he said. I will also not ask you to explain it. You do not owe me an explanation, Elara. Not for that. Nobody had ever given me those words. People had looked, asked, pitied, or pretended. No one had simply handed the door back to me and said it was mine to open. I felt something unclench in my chest that I had not known was clenched. A week later, I opened the door myself. We were in the library an hour past midnight. When I set down the book I was not reading and said, you asked me once what I believe. I would like to tell you what happened to my arms. He closed his book slowly. I told him about the November night, the storm, and the choice I still could not explain, to run back into a burning building for a piece of cloth. I told him about the heat, the weight, the way the fire found my skin, and about waking up bandaged in a room that smelled of antiseptic and my own fear. I told him about the man who said no one will want you now, and how I had carried that sentence through every room I entered since. I had never said any of it out loud before, and the words came out like water finding a crack in a dam. When I finished, the fire had burned to coals, and I was shaking, waiting for the pity I had rehearsed 1,000 times. He did not give it to me. The man who said that to you was telling you about himself, he said. A scar is evidence that something failed to destroy you. The woman who walked into that fire is not damaged, Elara. She is the reason you are alive. I did not know how to be loved by a sentence like that, so I retreated. Before that night, I had believed that telling the story would remake me in his eyes, that once he knew the worst of me, he would begin the careful distance everyone else had begun. He did the opposite. He moved closer, not physically, but in the 1,000 small ways that matter, remembering which chair I preferred, noticing when my tea went cold, leaving the library door open when he worked late. Trust, I was learning, was a door you kept opening, in both directions. I told him once that I had stopped letting people photograph me after the fire. A week later, I found a small framed picture in my room, caught mid-laugh at the kitchen table, sleeves rolled to my elbows without my noticing. The woman in it was not hiding. I hung it where I could see it while I worked. I thanked him badly and locked my door, turning his words over like stones. Something had begun, and I was terrified of it, because hope had always been the most expensive thing I owned, and I had learned to live on the interest of none at all. The weeks after that rearranged themselves around an unspoken understanding. Rosa began setting 2 places without asking. Sophia started coming to the workroom to talk while I mended, and she never once called me anything but her nephew's guest. We found a rhythm that looked from the outside like the rhythm of 2 people who simply lived in the same house. Evenings in the library, him with his ledgers, me with my mending, the fire between us. He asked my opinion once on a 17th century document chest, and I told him the truth, that the piece was good but the provenance shaky. He had it verified, and the vendor was quietly dropped. He trusted me again after that, a greater gift than thanks. He tested me once, deliberately. He asked whether I would prefer my meals in my room, since the house must feel strange. I said I would rather eat in the dining room because the company was better than the view. After that, he asked my opinion on smaller things, the wine, the flowers, and each question opened a small door onto a larger trust. I learned that his quietness was discipline, not absence. He noticed everything, the way Sophia's cough lingered, the way I reached for my sleeve when guests came near, and he acted without commentary. Slowly, dangerously, I began to feel something I had never allowed myself. Safe. Not protected, which I understood as a cage with better upholstery. Safe was the room where the absence of threat stopped being my full-time occupation. Spring came to the lake, and with it an invitation. Rosa carried in a cream envelope from a gallery in the city. A private opening, Alessandro said, for the Marlowe textiles. You should see them properly. I said I had nothing to wear. Sophia overheard me, and within days a dress appeared in my room, deep green silk long sleeves, made to my measurements, with a note in her hand. The woman should have the right to choose her own armor. I wanted to be angry. I was instead undone. The night of the gallery, I understood for the first time the width of the world Alessandro De Luca moved through. The collection filled 3 dark rooms, every case an altar to cloth that had outlived its makers. I had expected to feel small there. Instead, I felt only the strangeness of being permitted in, and the weight of his hand, light at my back, guiding without pulling. He knew the collection the way I knew thread. He stopped at a case of Venetian velvet and gave me the history of its dye, and I realized he had studied it before bringing me. I told him the velvet had been restored badly 50 years ago in a way that had drained the nap. You would have done better, he said. It was not flattery but a statement of fact, and I felt my face heat. That was when Bianca found us. She moved through the crowd like a blade through water, sleek and smiling, and kissed Alessandro's cheek with a practiced intimacy. She took in my long sleeves and modest neckline, and her smile sharpened. You must be the conservator, she said. How wonderful that someone finally taught the old house to hang art it can actually use. Underneath the layering I heard what she meant. I was a possession displayed for everyone in that room. I made it through another hour smiling and answering questions, while the old wound woke inside me. They can see the damage. Damaged things are worth less. When the curator asked me whether I was feeling unwell, I realized I had gone pale. I excused myself to the terrace and stood in, the cold air gripping the rail, hating myself for being undone by one woman's sentence. He found me there, because he always noticed when I left a room. He stood beside me at the rail. Tell me what you need, he said. Not what happened. What you need. I wanted to say I needed skin. Nobody questioned. What came out was smaller and truer. I need to know if I am embarrassing you, I said. That was the fear underneath. It was the cracked thing the room had now seen. He turned me to face him, one finger under my chin. Her opinion does not define what I see, he said. She sees a mystery she cannot solve, so she makes it small. I see the woman who stood in a burning building and would not let a tapestry die. I do not take the world's judgment of you. I want to be sure you do not take it either. He said nothing to Bianca that night, giving her no proof her words had landed. In the car home, he held my hand and neither spoke. I felt something rearranging itself around a terrible new idea, that I could be seen fully and not be diminished. That idea frightened me more than any threat, because I had no defense against being believed in. The weeks that followed were the happiest and most dangerous of my life. Sunday walks along the lake where I talked about thread and warp until my voice went hoarse. It was Alessandro himself who told me about the sewing room, late one night when I asked why his mother's room had been left untouched. My mother died when I was 12, he said. My father kept her rooms exactly as she left them, as if she might walk back in. I thought it was grief pretending to be love. Now I think he kept the room the way you keep a scar, because the pain is the proof she existed. He looked at me steadily. You told me once that you do not erase damage, that you keep it visible. I have been trying to learn that from you, Elara, for months. That confession undid me more than any kindness, because it revealed that the gentleman was not performing gentleness. He was in the middle of his own restoration, and he had chosen me as witness. I wanted to stay so badly I could feel it, and that is exactly why I asked him to end the arrangement. I said it plainly, my hands folded in my lap. I am leaving because staying has become something I want, and I need to know whether that want is real or only gratitude wearing clothes. He was silent a long time. If leaving is what you need, he said, I will not stop you or follow you. When you have decided what your want is, you will know where to find me. He did not argue, and that absence proved everything he had shown me real. Rosa packed my things without comment. Sophia pressed the wedding lace into my hands at the door, folded in muslin with a note, finish it, and then decide what you want to keep. I moved into a 2-room flat with a north window and a work table I bought with my own money, and began again with freelance work for dealers who had known my father, at half my old rate because a name means everything in that trade. My flat was small, and I loved it the way you love a thing built with your own hands. I bought a kettle, a lamp, a chair with good bones. The lace lay in its muslin on the work table, and I finished it at night by the north window, alone and careful. When the last stitch was tied off, I sat back and looked at it, and then I thought of him, and I let myself because no one was watching. The work came slowly, then faster. I restored a mourning dress, a set of baptismal linens, a flag that had survived a war and wanted to keep its holes honest. Each piece taught me the same lesson I could not yet learn for myself, that things could be valuable without being flawless. Alessandro did not call. Some part of me had expected a message. There was none, and the absence was its own kind of proof. The worst hour was always the one before sleep, when I heard his voice the way I had learned it, patient and low, and remembered the way he had looked at me the night I told him about a fire. I told myself I had done the right thing, and I learned what it meant to want someone without any claim on them. The work that broke the fraud wide open arrived that autumn, a box of papers from my father's old solicitor, whose daughter found my name among his files. It was the estate accounting, the one Victor had never shown me. The debt had been real, but it had been mostly settled by the liquidation. The balance Victor had inflated with fees and interest was nothing like the sum he had used to buy my freedom. I read the papers 3 times, my hands shaking, because the numbers told a different story than the one Victor had sold me. I considered burning them, the way I had once considered running. But I had spent too many years letting other people write my story, and I was done. The morning I walked into Victor's office, I wore my father's cufflinks and carried the folder flat against my chest like a shield. I would not be an asset anymore. I would be a woman with a name. I spent a week building the case thread by thread until every number had a source. Then I laid the folder on his desk. "You sold me for a debt that was already paid," I said. "I am going to Alessandro De Luca, and I am going to tell him exactly how you used his name." His face did a series of small collapses. "He will not believe you," he said. "He does not have to believe me," I said. "He has the same papers." I walked from his office into the bright afternoon and stood on the pavement, dizzy with what I had done. I had not gone to Alessandro for protection. I had gone to Victor alone, with evidence and a spine, and I had won, and the winning felt like the first clean thing I had taken for myself in years. I had spent my whole adult life believing that damaged people waited to be saved. Standing there, I understood I had just saved myself. I went to the estate that evening, and invited, and the gates opened before I could announce myself. The house had been watching for me. He was in the library, and he rose when I entered, and I saw relief move over his face that he did not try to hide. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting, and when I finished he said, "I knew. I have known since the week after you arrived." "Why did you not tell me?" I said. "Why did you let me believe I had been sold for real money?" He was quiet, and the quiet stretched. "Because I thought protecting you meant deciding what you needed," he said. "I wanted you to find the truth yourself so that it would be yours. I was wrong. I should have trusted you with it the day I learned it." I had prepared to be angry, but I could not deliver the speech because his reason had been a kind one. I had spent my life learning to stress kindness with strings. This one had none, only a man trying, badly, to give me my own victory instead of a borrowed one. "You gave me the truth to find on my own," I said. "That was a gift, even wrapped wrong." We stood in the firelight, and I understood that the next step belonged to me. If I stayed now, it would not be because a debt held me. It would be because I chose him. Around my 3rd week back in the city, the lace was finished, and I knew what it had been waiting for. "I came here tonight," I said, "to tell you something I have told no one, because I am ready." Then I did the thing I had practiced in my mirror for 6 years. I rolled my sleeve up to my elbow and held my burned arm out into the firelight, steady as a piece of work I had decided to sign. The silver rivers caught the light. He did not flinch. He did not look away. He did not speak, and in the silence the years of apology and hiding drained out of me like water finding ground. Then he did the one thing I had not foreseen. He took my scarred hand in both of his and pressed his mouth to the old burn on my wrist, not as a mercy but as a greeting, the way you kiss a hand you have waited to hold. I felt it all, the way through my chest. "I have never needed you to hide," he said. "I have wanted you to choose what you show me." And I understood what the arrangement had actually been, not a sale, but a strange kind of courtship conducted by a man who only knew how to be patient and honest. "Tell me what you see," I said, because I had spent so long seeing the damage that I had forgotten how to see anything else. He kept my hand in both of his thumb moving over the worst of the burns with a tenderness I had never received. "I see a woman who ran into fire for something she loved," he said. "I see the hands that did it and the proof that she survived. There is nothing damaged in any of it. I do not cherish you despite your scars, Elara. I cherish the woman who survived them. The scars are the history. You are the woman who lived to carry it." I had imagined that moment 1,000 times, always ending in pity or blankness. It had never occurred to me it could end like this, my hand held like a treasure, my history named as strength. I felt the old belief the hospital had taught me crack down its center and fall away. "The arrangement is over," I said. "I am not staying because I am grateful. I am staying because I am in love with you, and I needed to say it with nothing between us." He let go of my hand and I felt the loss like a cold wind, and then he kissed me gently. That is the only reason I ever wanted you to stay, he said. From the first morning you told me what you wanted for breakfast. I have been hoping you would one day choose me. Not need me, not own me. We had both been restored. He from the belief that he could only protect. I from the belief that I could only be protected. Word of what I had done in Victor's office traveled faster than I expected. A curator called from a museum, then a private collector, then the family that owned an altar cloth in a chapel outside the city, and the commissions outgrew my 2-room flat. I leased a small storefront near the river, painted the walls myself, and refused every offer of financial help from Alessandro because I needed to know I had opened that door with my own 2 hands. His studio opened in December, and in the front window hung a single piece of work, the De Luca wedding lace, mounted on dark silk, every thread anchored, in the places where history had been eaten away, filled with stitches that did not pretend to be invisible. Beside it, a card in my own hand read, "Damage is not a flaw when it is survived with honor." People stood before that window a long time, and I did not once reach for my sleeve. Sophia came first, on Rosa's arm, and cried when she saw the lace, telling me my father would have been proud. The dealers came, the ones who had once said my name with a pause, and I watched the pause leave their faces. I had made my name in a trade that runs on names, and the woman in the window reflection was not the woman who had hidden from her own mirror. He came late, when the room had emptied, and walked the gallery without speaking. He stopped before the lace and stood a long time. Then he turned, his face open. "You do not erase the damage," he said. "You keep it honest and make it beautiful. I have been waiting years to live my life the way you treat cloth." I crossed the room and took his hand. "For 6 years I believed the marks made me less," I said. "You were the first person who never asked me to apologize for my history. You just stayed." He lifted my scarred hand to his lips again, as in the library. "I do not cherish you despite your scars," he said. "I cherish the woman who survived them. That woman has her own name, above her own door, and I intend to spend the rest of my life reminding her what she survived." Outside, the first snow of the winter began to fall on the river, and the lace hung behind us, damage and survival stitched into something that would outlast everyone who had doubted it. Sophia married us on the lakeshore in the spring. Rosa cried during the vows. Victor Hale was not invited, and I did not think of him once. The dress I wore was deep green silk with long sleeves, chosen because it made me feel like myself, and I did not adjust them all day, not during the ceremony, not when I lifted my hand into the evening sun and watched the old burns glow like honey in the golden air. At the end of the night, they asked if the scars bothered me. I looked at the silver rivers once my shame. "They remind me I ran into a fire and came out carrying something worth saving," I said. "Everything that survives carries its history in its skin. That is not a flaw but proof of the thing endured. The man who loves me loved them from the first night I was brave enough to show them, because he understood before I did that they were never the wound." People ask whether he ever says those words again, whether the sentence became a habit. He does not repeat it often. It lives in smaller things, the way he reaches for my scarred hand in crowded rooms, the way he tells the story of the fire to strangers, the way he goes quiet across a table full of his world, the way he went quiet the first night he saw me. That first silence was the beginning of everything. The studio still stands by the river, and visitors ask whether the old cloth would not be more beautiful if the damage were invisible. I tell them the truth I spent years refusing. The marks of survival do not make something less beautiful. They become part of its story, and a story without its hardest chapter is only a rumor. I was sold once, by a man who thought I was an asset. I was handed to a ruthless Mafia boss who was supposed to be the end of me. Instead, he was the first man who ever looked at my scars and saw not what I had lost, but what I had kept. I stayed because I chose him, and he chose me, and between us, stitch by honest stitch, we restored something neither of us had known was broken, my belief that I was worthy of being chosen at all.